Hey there Pop-Tarts, this is another resource for Self-Love September. I am very excited to dive in to this particular topic. I want to somewhat dedicate this video to a wonderful woman called Chamberlain who has a channel here on YouTube called Snake Power. I'm going to link that down below for you so you can go over and check it out. I think it's fair to say that we have been acquainted and interested in each other's journeys for quite a while now. It's been really awesome to get to know her journey and enjoy her content. I really love the way she talks and what she talks about. I like the fact that she gives you an insight into her own story and her struggles and her triumphs, but I feel like she kind of alchemizes it so that it's not just about giving you a portal into her life, but also leaning into how those messages and how those lessons can be helpful for you and how all of these things can be tied together into wisdom that we can all imbibe. So I really enjoy listening to what she has to say. When I was asking for some ideas for things to talk about for Self-Love September and asking my audience on Facebook what they wanted me to focus on, Iris asked me if I could talk about the issue of trusting yourself, actually trusting that you're going to make the right decisions for yourself, that you're going to move yourself in the correct direction. She basically mentioned that it can be all too easy to decide that you're going to move in this positive, healthy direction, you're going to turn over a new leaf, you're going to be an ally to yourself, but then you go back to the old habits, you know, you fall off the wagon, you do something that is distinctly unhealthy or unhelpful for you, and then it's almost like the trust that you had in yourself and your willingness to do the right thing for yourself is kind of shattered. And she asked me if I could talk about rebuilding that trust and reasons why we lose trust in ourselves, and I thought this is some really fizzy shizzle and I definitely want to talk about it. I was a little bit fiddly for a while about how I wanted to get this topic started, but I think I've pretty much got in mind everything I want to say. So I'm going to begin by talking basically about some reasons why we might end up not trusting ourselves and not having that strong sense that it's okay to trust our instincts and it's okay to go on this journey with ourselves. Some people are struggling to trust themselves because they just have a lot of evidence at their fingertips, at their disposal, of all the crappy mistakes, all the fuck-ups, all the wrong decisions, all the bad paths that they took in the past. A lot of people struggle to trust themselves because they have access to all kinds of evidence that they have made unhealthy decisions in the past, that they've gone back to negative habits, that they made really heinous mistakes, and they will play the footage of that evidence over and over again, and they will use it to convince themselves that they really can't trust themselves with their own flourishing and with their own development, and that they actually will always be pitted against themselves. They'll always be an enemy to themselves. And a lot of the time, even if they can see that there were lessons to be taken from those mistakes and there was wisdom to be gleaned from those wrong pathways that were taken, it's still difficult to put that trust back intact when you actually look back over the timeline of your life, or over one period of your life in particular, and you think, my God, how many different ways could I have fucked that up, and I did it so royally. and really just replaying that footage. When you can see a recurring pattern of giving in to temptation or compulsion, it can definitely be really difficult to feel like you can be adequately on your own side and supporting yourself and taking yourself down the path you really want to go down. Some people were raised with this idea that somebody else should have the authority or somebody else knows best. I think a lot of people grow up and end up being very underconfident in their own instincts. We're not necessarily taught about following our intuition, and we're not really taught that much, I don't think, about personal sovereignty. I mean, even down to the bare bones stuff, like the fact that most of us are not taught in school how to do taxes, how to take care of bills, you know, what is a credit score, what is a credit rating, what is debt. It's almost as though school and the systems that exist around school kind of purposefully keep us in the dark about our own sovereignty and our own freedom and how to run our shit in a way that makes sense to us and how to listen to our intuition. It's all very much about servitude, and it's about following rules, and it's about everything being very uniform, and even that basic stuff that would make it easier for us to exist inside consensus reality is actually denied to us. So I think that that can be a big reason why people grow up underconfident in their own instincts and feeling as though they can't have that strong relationship with themselves, they can't team up with themselves. And other people just come from a family dynamic where they have been taught that one of their parents is is the figure of authority, and they are the person that knows everything, and it's almost as though you're brought up in this energy of helplessness and this energy of feeling like you need to surrender power to a parental caregiver. Some people feel like they lived in the shadow of a sibling, or they lived in the shadow of somebody else in the family, and they never really felt like their wisdom and their capability was honoured or encouraged, and that can lead to issues in adulthood regarding insecurities about taking control and insecurities about making the right decisions for yourself. I think a lot of people are infantilized or disenfranchised in ways by the different kind of dynamics that they're brought up in. Having a connection to something bigger than yourself, something that feels like it goes beyond your personal ego experience of life, can be really important when it comes to trusting yourself. And I know that there can be a pattern amongst people who are walking a sincere psycho-spiritual path of finding that they trust themselves less and doubt themselves more when they fall off the wagon with their spiritual practice. And those two things are definitely connected, there's no doubt about it. When we can be more transpersonal about our life experiences and connect those experiences to practices and mythologies, you know, spiritual narratives, spiritual studies, then we can find that we have access to so much more power and potency and feelings of deep capability than if we are falling off the spiritual wagon and not thinking about any of that stuff, and really just feeling like the only thing that exists is ourselves and our individual ego self. That's not going to be empowering. It's not going to be a healthy way of doing it. So the more that we consistently walk the spiritual path and engage in spiritual practices, often the more that we manage to be able to trust ourselves, talk to ourselves, be with ourselves through our challenges. Some people are just convincing themselves that they are going to end up like their parents, that they're going to end up moving into the same dynamics as they've seen other family members move into, that they don't really have any free choice, they don't really have any true power to change that narrative, and they're going to end up going down the same road. And some people feel really enslaved by that idea, and they live in fear of that idea, and yet they're also resigned to it. They're almost not consciously interested in challenging it, maybe because it feels too difficult, maybe it's because it seems impossible. And other people have that same sense of entrapment and powerlessness, but it's because of things like mental health issues. And there's very much this idea that certain people have, that they have really no control, they have no choices, they have no way of shifting their perspective on its axis when it comes to that stuff. And it can really lead to this deep feeling that you can never trust yourself, and you can never make good decisions for yourself, and you will always have to kind of pass up accountability for that stuff because it's never going to work for you. But actually, there are different ways that different people deal with these different things, so they come to a place of being able to trust themselves and know what is the right path to go down, feel into the correct direction, and actually take that path. If you want to start to trust yourself more and work with yourself more, rather than feeling like you're pitted against yourself and you're making crappy decisions which are really kind of tripping you up, I think one of the first things to do is to forgive yourself sincerely for whatever fuck-ups you made in the past. And you've got to almost keep forgiving yourself. For some people, it's not just a case of doing one forgiveness ritual or saying out loud, I forgive myself. You know, I understand where I was coming from in those prior situations, and I appreciate that I felt like I had to do what I had to do at the time, and I forgive myself for anything I feel ashamed about or embarrassed about now. Sometimes it's not enough for somebody to just do that. We need to almost forgive ourselves daily. Sometimes it has got to be a daily practice of waking up and saying, I forgive myself for the past, I place myself in the present where I have power, where I have dominion, and I look lovingly towards the future. I look excitedly towards the future. Something like that, where you are recognizing on a daily basis that you want to live in the energy of forgiveness when it comes to the shit in the past that you can't change. Sometimes you just have to appreciate what you were going through back then and where you were coming from back then. And that doesn't mean that you absolve yourself of accountability. It doesn't mean that you put yourself in a situation where you convince yourself that everything you did in the past or said in the past, every decision you made in the past was okay and you don't need to learn from it. It just means that you get to this point where you choose to recognize that you were working with the materials and the resources that you had at that time, and all life is evolution, and you've evolved beyond that point now, and you want to continue to evolve beyond that point now. It's kind of a little bit of that saying, you know, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. I really like that. I know it's become a real meme and it's probably probably died a cruel death, you know, on the pyre of cliche now. But there's definitely something to it, and I think that's what I'm driving at. Every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. It's really about looking at the stuff that you're holding on to and replaying in your mind and using as evidence that you can't trust yourself, and just looking at who you were then and what you had at your disposal and what you were dealing with and what you had learned, the conditioning you'd picked up, the difficulties you'd been through, and just thinking, you know what, it wasn't okay, and I don't want to behave like that anymore. I don't want to keep making those decisions, but I can understand how I ended up in that situation. It's not that hard to recognise why I made those kinds of decisions, and I'm not going to hate on myself for it, because that is creating fractures inside my psyche where I'm essentially trying to have a bit of a sort of psychological boxing match with myself, and that is making me fall down, that's making me trip up, that's really bringing me to the same hurdles. I've got to be with me. I've got to be with all past versions of me. I've got to accept, I've got to love, I've got to envelop all parts of me so that I can continue to move forward, and I can do this with all of me intact rather than stopping every 5 minutes to have a boxing match with a past version of myself that I feel resentful of all the time. If you're listening to me talking right now and you're thinking to yourself, that is a very, very, very difficult thing to do, Kellyanne, that is nigh on impossible to do, then I would definitely ask you to do a quick mindset shift where instead of thinking about how difficult it is to do it, you think about how important it is to do it, and you think about what will happen ultimately, potentially, if you don't do it. Think about how vital it is to do this work, even if you need to come to it every morning, even if you do struggle, even if you do stumble. Think about why it's important and what it's going to earn you in your life if you actually manage to bring yourself to this work conscientiously. It's a really sobering thing to realise that every other relationship you have in your life is negotiable. It might not feel negotiable at certain times, you might not feel like you have the ability to walk away from it, but essentially you do. You do have that ability. It might be difficult, it might feel scary, but you've got the choice to do that. The only person you can't really walk away from is you. You have to negotiate this thing called life every single day with yourself, and you can either have a really, really fucking shitty relationship with yourself every day, or you can try to make it as good as it can be. And that really is a reason to bury the hatchet with yourself and move on in this state of allyship where you feel like you've got your best interests at heart and you're going to move towards your best interests, and you're not going to keep berating yourself for what happened in the past anymore, or kind of giving yourself the eye thinking, you know what, I'm not capable of this, I'm not going to be able to do this correctly, I'm going to fuck this up. You know, that's not how you want to live every day of your life. You wouldn't want to live every day of your relationship with somebody else like that. You would eventually walk away, because what a crappy relationship, right? What a horrible fucking state of affairs. And yet you consistently go along with this pattern of doing this to yourself. And that is really what it's about. That's why it's important to forgive yourself and to recognise that you want to move on from this point, and to refuse to look at the past versions of yourself and the mistakes that you've made and be resentful and, you know, pit yourself against yourself. Every new morning is a chance to set your vibration, to confirm your intention to yourself, to reaffirm that commitment that you've got to your own journey. And so I would definitely recommend choosing some words of power that you can say every single morning. There doesn't need to be any bells and whistles. You don't need to stand on ceremony. It can be sweet, simple, and to the point. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't need to, it can be like a no frills situation where you just stand in front of the mirror and you speak some words of power, and those words of power are intended to center you inside your intention to be with yourself, to make decisions that will help you to thrive, etc. And really choosing the kind of words that you say to yourself every morning that lock you into your intention and reaffirm your commitment. That's a very personal thing. You've got to go on your own journey to find the language that makes you feel fizzy inside, and no one else can decide upon that language for you. It's got to be something that comes from you and something that really makes you feel things deeply. And you could choose some song lyrics, you could choose some poetry, you could think about different words that have really affected you in a positive way, and then really take influence from those different words and write something which is unique to you. It's totally up to you, it's totally your decision, but choose maybe some words of power to lock you into that pure intention every morning, and think of every single new day as a series of different adventures that you're going on and experiences that you're having that can move you into closer closer alignment with yourself. You're being given a number of different obstacles, if you like, that you can overcome, and experiences that you can learn from. And every single thing you go through on every single individual day is an opportunity for you to act in alignment with your pure intentions and with your deepest needs. The words are just the start. The words are what remind you that every new day is an opportunity for you to trust yourself more, be with yourself more, hold yourself close more. You can very much choose to go further than using words of power in the morning that you speak. You can write something down. You can choose to write a manifesto for your life. From this point onwards, you can write a really deep poem or a statement of your intention. You can write a list of your guiding principles for how you want to make your decisions, how you want to interact with people, how you want to pursue your dreams. You know, so really writing things down and then keeping them in a prominent place so that you can reread them when you are in need of them would also be something really helpful for you. You can actually collect quotes and lyrics and poetry, etc. You can collect different things that make you feel that sense of empowerment and that sense of being connected to yourself and being strong in your core and strong in what you know is the right thing for you. You might find that it's useful to keep some form of book or some kind of little list on your phone or on your laptop where you write down the different words that have really sunk in and have really reminded you of your desire to trust yourself and be with yourself and live your best life. And so you can actually go through those quotes, those lyrics, those words when you're feeling unsure, when you're feeling like you could be teetering on the brink of making a crappy decision or going back to a yucky old habit. You've actually got that in your toolkit, and it is a literal tool. It's something you can really go to, and that could be a really awesome thing to lift you up when you're feeling down. So always be thinking about creating those collections, those core collections of things that you know really help you out. For a lot of people, it's playlists. They might not necessarily want to focus so much on words that are inspiring, but they might want to make a few playlists on Spotify or whatever it is that they use. I use Spotify. Playlists can be so useful. You can really collect music together that makes you feel stronger and that reminds you of what it is that you really want and what you're really working towards. So when those little voices come in from the yuckier parts of your ego, when your fear-based mechanisms come in, when those temptations come in and they feel really fucking low vibe, you've got something there to lift you up instantly. Music is really such a shamanic prescription. I feel that it instantly changes my vibration, and it's something that can lift me up so much more easily when I feel like maybe I haven't got the energy or the focus to take on words, or I feel like nothing's going in terms of language. I can really kind of move to the playlist and kind of also go for a walk while I'm listening to the playlist and get that blood pumping around the body, and really just appreciate the music that I've curated, that I've put together to remind me of what I want and what I'm aiming for and what I'm working towards, you know. If you're struggling to believe that you have got an inner voice, a guidance system that will help you to stay out of trouble, keep your nose clean and keep on trucking, then it might be a really good idea for you to keep an intuition journal, even if it's just for a set amount of time. And what the intuition journal is, the whole idea of it from my perspective, is that you write down the times when you had a feeling that something was going to happen, or that you shouldn't have done something, or you should make a specific decision, and then later on it turns out that you were right about that. It doesn't matter whether or not you actually followed the hunch at the time, just record the hunch and record the consequences of either following or not following. And really that helps you to understand that you do have this internal guidance system. You do have a voice that you can follow that's helping you out. You do have a sense of fear. You do have a sense of instinct. You do have a sense of when something doesn't feel right. You do have a sense of what would be best for you. And even if you don't follow those hunches, write them down and just say, I had this really strong feeling that I should have done this, but instead I did this, and now I'm realizing that that hunch, that instinct that I had, was something that I needed to follow. It was something that was right for me, and I didn't tune into it, but I will next time. You know, something like that, just so that you've got the evidence there that the inner voice is within you and it is, you know, trying to get your attention. And sometimes you won't follow those hunches, but the intuition journal is really there to encourage you to follow them and to encourage you to celebrate your intuitive insights and your hunches, so that you appreciate them more often and you let them come into your conscious mind more often, rather than trying to shove them in a box under the bed and be like, no, I don't want to listen to you. I want to carry on with this destructive crap fest, you know? So it's really about appreciating the fact that your intuitive insights are there and honouring them in the moment. And sometimes we can only get to a point where we're honouring our intuition in the moment by looking at it in hindsight. I often say that when it comes to intuition, much of our learning is in the rearview mirror. And I said that in my video about intuition, which I will link for you guys below if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet. I've noticed that it is one that has been watched a lot more than my average video has been watched, so I think it's been helpful to people. I've got a feeling some people have come back and kind of replayed it and absorbed the messages again. But one thing that I said in the intuition video is that learning about your intuition and how to follow it really, much of that learning happens in the rearview mirror. A hunch comes up, you don't take it, you ignore it, you suppress it, and then later on you look back and you go, oh my God, my intuition was talking to me. I was getting those hunches, but I just wasn't following them. And that's how much of our learning is done. It's done by looking back at the hunches that we didn't follow and going, yeah, there it was, and next time I'm going to listen. One of the biggest reasons that we struggle to trust ourselves is because of those voices of temptation. So basically, we know in our heart of hearts, we know deep down in the sediment of ourselves that we don't want to do these damaging things, we don't want to engage in these destructive behaviours, we don't want to carry on down these roads that feel crappy. But when we're at a low ebb, when we're feeling particularly vulnerable, when we've had a crappy day, that other voice will come in, or that collection of different voices will come in. And those voices are pretty nihilistic in nature most of the time. They're just voices that are like, oh fuck it, it doesn't matter, just do it, just have one, you know. Or they're voices that say, you've deserved this, you've had a difficult day, you engage in that crappy behaviour, sweetheart, you've done enough to earn it. And actually what happens is we start to follow those voices. We follow the lilting, demonic sound of those voices, those melodic voices, those scummy melodic voices. And then later on we kind of realise that, you know, those voices were part of us, but they were really from these parts of us that feel weak, that feel wounded, that feel incapable, that feel like there's a void there. And what we did was we followed those voices, and then we come back to this point of centre where we're like, you know what, I really wish that other voice had been around at the time. The voice that comes from that higher self that knows what I really want to do and how I really want to be with myself and how I really want to treat myself. But that voice didn't seem to be there. That voice had fucking gone on vacation, and I was left with these voices that were like little demons on my shoulders telling me to do these things that I really don't want to do. And it's really about thinking about how we can cope with that. That's a big reason that a lot of people struggle to trust themselves, because they've got all these other voices coming in that they know are not helpful, but ultimately that they choose to follow. You know, it's like a Pied Piper of Hamelin situation. And then later on, when you're sitting at the bottom of the sea, you're like, damn it, there was a voice inside me somewhere that was supposed to say I should have stayed in school and not followed the Pied Piper, but for some reason I didn't hear that voice. I just heard his lilting deathly flute, and now I'm here at the bottom of the fucking river and I don't know what to do about it. I took us all on a fucking journey there. I really went there. I really like that fable though, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I think it's a really creepy, really interesting, very symbolic story that has a lot of different layers to it. But anyway, never mind about the Pied Piper of Hamelin, back to the fucking theme of the video. So how do we deal with that, basically? How do we deal with recognising that we do have these crappy voices that come in and go, oh, go on, it's only once, whatever, who cares, you're going to be dead in a minute anyway. And those voices are very appealing, they're full of E-numbers, they're very tasty. And, you know, before long, we've completely forgotten about that voice, which is really the voice that's trying to protect us and bolster us and strengthen us, the voice that comes from what a lot of people would say, the higher self. When the crappy voices come along, try questioning them. Try putting yourself in the position of an investigator of some kind, someone whose job it is to check whether or not a voice is absolute bullshit. You know, ask the voice to give you 5 reasons why you ought to go down this slippery slope that you know is probably going to be tinged with regret on the other end of it, and see what that voice comes up with, and cast a critical eye and cast your critical mind over this voice that's giving you these bullshit reasons why you should do something that you ultimately know is destructive for you. And that voice will very soon crumble under questioning, because there aren't enough good reasons. There really aren't enough good reasons. There aren't 5 anyway. There aren't even 3 most of the time. And the reasons that this voice comes up with are ridiculous. You know, they're really based on temporal crap, like, well, you've had a hard day, you deserve to treat yourself. then go back in and question the voice again and say, well, why can't I treat myself with a bubble bath? Why can't I treat myself with a magazine? Why can't I treat myself with a nice cup of artisan tea? Why do I have to treat myself with the drugs that I'm trying to get off of? Why do I have to treat myself with this crappy behaviour that I'm trying to leave behind? Why would that help me? Why would that serve me? Explain it to me. You know, really kind of like sit that voice on a chair and walk around it like a investigator and be like, answer the fucking question. Tell me why it would be the best thing for me. You know, pit yourself against that voice. Are the reasons that that voice is giving you for engaging in the destructive behaviour actually bullshit? Can you actually see through them? Can you argue with them? And the high likelihood is that you fucking can. Remember to go back to your tools, go back to your commitments, read the words of power, look in the journal, look at the manifesto that you've written, the list of ways that you want to treat yourself, you know, the list of things that you want to remember when you're at a low ebb, the playlist that you've put together. Use those things. There is absolutely no point in amassing a toolkit if you're not using it when you are at your low points. When you're at your lowest points is when you open up that bad boy. You've got to open it up and you've got to be like, I put things in here for just this very situation. Let me dive in there and actually use these things that I've created for myself. Don't forget that in your toolkit, you've also got inspiring videos. You've got speeches that are inspiring. You have got books that you've read that you can reread. There's blog posts. There's lists of things that people have suggested. There could be people in your personal life you could call. There could be professionals, readers, you know, holistic workers that you can make an appointment with. Whenever somebody's struggling with trusting themselves, listening to themselves, being with themselves, I always suggest meditations, body scan meditations, spending time in solitude, spending time chanting mantras, anything like that, listening to your own breath, just lying on the bed and being with yourself. I think that when we don't trust ourselves, it's all too easy to try to lean into somebody else's perceived strength, somebody else's perceived ability or wisdom, and we forget that we are a bottomless well of our own wisdom and insight, and that's an important thing to recognize. Be with yourself, even if sometimes it is difficult to do that. Really recognize that there is a guru within you, and you need to start to pick up the phone to that guru that is within you as well. That is also another important thing, and it can really help you, especially the body scan meditations. It can help you to understand that a lot of your intuitive insights are held in the body, and this is something else I talk about in my intuition video. A lot of the time when you're not sure what your instincts are telling you, go to the body and the body will surely tell you what the fuck is up. And that's something that happens with me, and I know it happens with so many people that I've worked with and spoken to over the years. Intuition tries to ring out in the body if it can't get through into your mind, you know. It will try to go for a different approach. It will go for the physiological avenue. So really tune into the body, recognize when things are changing, when messages are coming through. Finally, I just want to end by saying that you do not have to take anybody else's advice or honour anybody else's assessment of your situation without filtering it through your critical thought and through your own intuition. Whenever somebody advises you on something, always make sure that you take that advice and you test it against the relevance of your own situation. Test it against your own deepest instincts. Don't feel like you've got to take anything wholesale and act on it without, first of all, putting it through that filter. Think about whether or not it is valuable, whether or not it is of worth. You don't need to blindly follow anyone else. When it comes to trusting yourself, you've got to actually bring things back to self and filter things through yourself, you know, instead of just blindly taking them and feeling like you have to enact that advice. You have to do something about that advice without first of all tuning in with yourself. If you're ever trying to do that and you feel like those little like temptation demons are on your shoulders and you're not really acting from that place of the higher self and from your highest intentions, just go back to the things that you've written down. Go back to those things that you've written where you've really clarified what you want to do, how you want to treat yourself, where you want your life to go, etc. And test the advice that other people have given against those resources that you've created that are designed to help you to tap back into what you're supposed to be doing, what your plans are, etc. You know, those things are there to remind you of your purest and highest intentions for yourself when you feel like you've gone off off track with that stuff. So really use those resources to remind you of what it is that you're supposed to be working on. This has been a lot. This has been a hell of a lot. I really appreciate you for watching this far. If you have done, thank you. I hope you're enjoying Self-Love September. Don't forget to use the hashtags if you want to tell your own stories or give your own insights. That would be amazing. So much love until the next resource, and don't forget you can catch me on SoundCloud for the Self-Love Sunday segment over there as well. Those are free downloadable audio files that I offer every Sunday, also about the theme of self-love. Okay, much love and self-love, guys. Blessed be. Mwah! Oh, I found an altar space. Just set up here.